So I believe that we all have these inner knowings, these inner whispers, and they're talking to us all the time. And some of them, get loud, and some of them we really need to pay attention to because we don't want them to just go away, that flame to just poof. And so I could just hear it. It was like, Michelle, you need to prioritize yourself again.
Welcome to Making Change with Your Money, a podcast that highlights the stories and strategies of women who experienced a big life transition and overcame challenges as they redefined financial success for themselves. Now here's your host, certified financial planner, Laura Rotter.
I am so excited to have as my guest today, Michele Lamoureux. She's an author, speaker, self-love coach, and host of the top-ranked global podcast, The Good Life with Michele Lamoureux. Michele interviews world-class experts, authors, CEOs, and offers solocasts to inspire midlife women to live happier, healthier, and more meaningful lives. As the author of Design a Life You Love, Michele teaches women the power of self-love. She spent 15 years in corporate America before becoming an entrepreneur and founding Lamoureux Media, where she offers coaching programs and curated content for women who want to up-level their lives. So welcome, Michele, to the Making Change with Your Money podcast.
I'm really honored to be sitting with you today, Laura. So fun to be here.
Looking forward to our conversation. And I'm going to start, as I start all my podcasts, with the question, what was money like in your family growing up?
I love this question. And I actually reflect on it often because money was not something we had a lot of growing up, but I walked away with a really positive message about money. I'm first generation American on my mother's side, second on my father's. So I'll speak for me, but I think generally speaking, a lot of people who have parents who've come here and see hardworking parents who really want to focus on making a better life for their families. And so money became a vehicle to love and support their family. And that is how I think it wasn't like something they talked about, but they were both aligned in terms of that value around family. So my brothers and I didn't have the cool Nike sneakers that were so popular. I'm Gen X in the late 70s and early 80s. Everyone can picture them with the red swoosh. We didn't have those. All of our friends had them. But my dad managed to take us on a vacation every February and April and outings in the summer. So they prioritized experiences, time together. There was always, my mom's an amazing cook, always fresh fruits and vegetables and meals that we sat around. So they prioritized nourishment. My dad got his degree. He was the first to go to college in his family, and he put himself through. Got a degree in electrical engineering. And so tech was a big part of growing up. And so money was spent. We had the first Mac computer when it came out. Nobody else in the neighborhood had that. My dad bought a video camera because I was in musical theater, actually with Joey McIntyre from New Kids on the Block when he was 8, before he's, became the well-known celebrity that he is today. But he bought that so he could videotape and capture those memories of me on stage as a child. And so it just sort of warms my heart in terms of how they approached money. And so when he was 50, he became an entrepreneur. He just like his father. So I came from a family of entrepreneurs. When my grandfather came here when he was a young man, he bought a store with his brother and they grew that and sold it. And so my dad, with this focus on family, realized he had 3 kids that he was going to have to put through college. And they also had an emphasis on education. And so by 58, he retired. He put the 3 of us through college. He helped my 2 brothers with part of their tuition for MIT Business School. He helped us with down payments on our house. Again, money was for family, for foundations, for support, for empowerment, for creating a better future for the next generation of family. And so I have so much gratitude and respect, and I feel like I've taken away such great lessons about it and how to save. Because I also learned from him, it's not what you make, it's what you do with that money and how you prioritize it, which I know is a big part of your work, Laura.
Yes. And so how did he teach you about saving? Is that something that he actually sat you down, Michele, and talked about, or you just watched him?
No, he was good about this. So I remember my very first job. I was 16 and I worked at a bank over the summer. And
Wow.
I remember, I was like, some administrative role in there. And I remember one of my coworkers, this guy, Paul, I'll never forget him because he was like, do you want me to buy you beers and stuff? I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I was a good kid. I was like, I'm fine. And he had access to my account and he's like, you've saved $3,000. I don't have a penny. Like, I don't have any money saved. How have you saved $3,000? And I was like, my dad told me you need to save your money. And so he taught me when I had that job, save your money. What is it that you're putting it towards? Education. This is going to go towards your college. So he paid for all of our stuff, but he taught us to save that money. And actually, when I know it's kind of popular now, whether parents want it or not, for millennials to live at home, but I did choose to. Culturally, it's very normal to do that. It's kind of a norm. And so I stayed at home for 3 years after college and I saved about $30,000. Again, my parents didn't have me pay, rent or towards the food, the nourishment. That was all part of supporting the family. But they showed me like it was important to save. So I was able to buy my first car with cash at 27. It was a Saab convertible. It was used, but my first condo by the time I was 30.
That is really impressive, Michele.
So that's why I have so much gratitude. I have so much gratitude for it, for the way that they did it. And also, I would say, just to give, my mom was a good partner for him in terms of, she prioritized the food. And thankfully, she had a great sense of style. And so she taught me how to buy clothes. You didn't have to have the designer clothes to look and feel good. So I learned that. And also just generosity of spirit. If you don't have money to give, you can give your time. You can make food for somebody. You can be a kind-hearted listening ear. She's such an empath. And she was the safe space for so many of the kids in the neighborhood. We were the house that everyone came over to. And so there was always food on the table, a loving environment. And that's what was prioritized. And that's what I walked away with.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's such a beautiful portrait, Michele, that you just gave of your family. I was recently in a group where, frankly, talking to a bunch of people that don't have such positive memories of growing up, I think it's unfortunately rarer than it should be to hear that, the kind of tribute, I have to say, that you just gave to your parents and how they brought you and your brothers up. I'm curious that I found that a number of the women I've interviewed grew up, as I did, only girls. Were you the only girl in a family that otherwise included boys?
Yes, I have two brothers. I'm the middle child. And that was part of the takeaway too. It's interesting because I was painting the house with my dad at 11 years old, scraping the side of the house and learning to do that kind of thing versus being in the kitchen with my mom. I think culturally, there was such an emphasis on being that caretaker in the culture and stuff. And she wanted me to prioritize education. And so I loved working. And so anything I could do to help around the house, whether it was her or whatever. But in a way, I wish there was more time in the kitchen. I do have nice memories of being with my mom and my Nana, but I'm not the cook that either of them were. Those are lovely memories, sitting and, making some of the traditional foods. But yeah.
So I think that's wonderful because often I imagine that there would be sort of a segmentation of roles within the family if there are more than one sex. And so would be a clear differentiation. And it sounds like that might have happened, but your mother was clear that she didn't want it to happen.
She didn't. She's very modern minded. It's why she came to the United States. And she always, they treated me the same. Although I will remember one time when my parents went away, just once they went on a trip and my Nana stayed with us. And my grandmother told me I had to help clear the table. And I said, well, what about the boys? What about my brothers? She said, no, you are going to help me. That's not their job. And so this is the same mother that raised my mother. But my mother had she didn't buy into all of that. She was much too modern. And so I think she made it an effort to make sure that I never felt like I had a different role within the family at all.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm hearing from you, Michele, that that you took it for granted that you would go to college, that you started saving when you were 7 and you...
No, not 7, 16, 16. Oh yeah, exactly. From the time I was born, I went to work and yeah.
But you knew you were going to be going to college. That wasn't a question. Is that correct?
Yeah, education was prioritized. Yes, my parents, like I said, everything they did, even when they didn't have much, was on a future that they were helping to support, create, for sure. Yeah.
And did you have a sense of what you were interested in studying?
I was always about justice. So I always thought, like, everyone's like, oh, you should be a lawyer. And so I studied political science. It was called government. I went to a liberal arts school in Maine. And I also was an education minor. My mom was a teacher before she stayed at home with us. Yeah, I always thought I was going to go to law school and ended up as a paralegal in a law firm and kind of pursuing that path until I talked to enough lawyers that seemed deeply unhappy with their work. And they were like, Michele, go get your MBA. Don't go to law school. They're like, you'll be a great lawyer, but don't do it. Don't do it. And so I listened to them and I didn't go and get a JD. I didn't follow that path.
So I'm from a family. My father was a lawyer. My uncle's a lawyer. My cousins are lawyers. My sister's a lawyer. And my father, though he says he doesn't remember saying this, but he said to me, get a JD degree. You don't need to practice as a lawyer. It's just a good degree to have. And I did not. I went for my MBA instead, as you did. And I remember my sister saying, my husband's from a family of doctors. He's a doctor. My son is a doctor. Everybody in family's a doctor. And my sister turned to me and said, you're the only non-professional in the room. Which again, I think there was a bit of competition there, but it's interesting. I'm so glad I did not get my law degree. The lawyers that I know work long hours and often are not particularly happy about the work they're doing.
And that's kind of what I saw. I was looking to the women partners as what my future could look like. And it didn't feel aligned with the life I sort of had envisioned for myself. And actually, I was going to apply to get an MBA and I didn't because I ended up coming back into the firm in marketing. And within 6 months, I was promoted to the marketing director. So my career sort of took an unexpected turn when I chose to practice marketing instead. And so there was no time to go get the MBA. It was sort of an on-the-job MBA, but it was a little bit unexpected, but it was great.
So, Michele, what drew you to marketing?
I left the law firm as a paralegal and I worked for an executive search firm, and they were placing different types of positions within startup companies. So it was interesting because I've always been around entrepreneurs. Like I said, my grandfather, my dad, my husband, my younger brother, always around entrepreneurs, and all of the clients at the law firm. The majority of them were startups. So it was like this world of startups. So I was always sort of excited by the ideas that were being generated and people's ability to bring these visions to life. But one of the positions that we were filling were marketers. And I'd literally never even heard the term marketing in college at my liberal arts college. I was, like I said, a political science major. I wish there was some exposure to that. But I was like, oh, I think I would actually enjoy this. And I happened to be talking to one of the women at the law firm who was the head of paralegals. She was my boss at the time. And she's like, there's a marketing position opening up. Would you be interested? I'm like, yeah, for sure. And so I went in for the interview and then I got the job. And then 6 months later, I was the head of marketing. So it was sort of unexpected. But I think so I'm kind of glossing over, but I worked those lawyer hours as a paralegal. I said yes to every project.
Michele, you said that you thought marketing would be something that you would be good at. I'm paraphrasing. What about you and your skills made you think that?
Yeah. So what I learned of it and what I knew about it, the creativity, big picture thinking, connecting with people, relationship development, it was really more aligned with, I feel like, so many of my strengths. And when I got in the job, what I loved about it was that I was in a law firm, and I love working with attorneys, love them. I just had I had the greatest experience as a paralegal, and it was almost like having my own company within the law firm because I was supporting their business development goals, but I had my own team and I reported to the head of the law firm. So it was like I was doing my own thing within this environment that was really taking care of all the clients that they had. So it ended up being a fantastic fit for me.
It's so interesting. I know some young people, contemporaries of my kids who are around 30, give or take, who are in paralegal positions. I've never heard anyone describe it as something they really enjoy. And certainly it sounds like, as you just described it, that you're already sort of using your entrepreneurial chops within a larger firm, which I'm imagining, in your 20s, it sounds like you were mature beyond your age. Was there a role that you had within the family that had you someone?
I like I said, I always had a sense of fairness and justice. And so, right, whether that was, making sure that the remote control, everyone had their fair turn of like creating rules and structure around that stuff. Watching my parents work so hard. I watched them work so hard. And like I said, everything was in service to family. So I did have a sense of responsibility to want to have that life that they work so hard to give. And to your point about paralegals, I happened to be in a very young firm. So the founders were all still alive. It wasn't one of the ones that, had been around 100 years. And it was a really young and vibrant place where people really were kind and they did like what they did. It was a nice environment. So, and also I just think I love to work. And so anything that challenges my brain and allows me to be in service of others makes me happy. So all of that was, I think, why I enjoyed it. But for sure, I have a sense of responsibility. I've always had that.
Right. And it's even beyond that, right? Because it's a sense of leadership that you feel that it can fall upon you to go above and beyond what your role might have, been on paper. And luckily, or maybe not luckily, maybe that's why you took the position. It was in a small enough place that you could, more of an organizational role within the firm.
Yeah, it was actually the 9th largest firm when I became the director, and became the 3rd largest in Boston by the time I left. So it was bigger. It was just young. It's hard to explain it. I mean, 300 lawyers. It was about 300 lawyers or 300 employees, maybe 300 lawyers. No, it wasn't small, but young and vibrant. And I think everyone had that kind of can-do attitude, and really just, it seemed like, it was just it was a nice place to be. It was a really nice place to be. So culture matters, though. Like, I'm thinking about those 30-year-olds you're talking about. I interviewed at a couple of other places, and I can guarantee you I would have lasted about 6 months to a year and I would have been out of there. It was just not a fun culture. So culture matters in companies.
So Michele, what changed that you decided to leave this firm that sounds like it was a great place to work?
Yeah.
How long were you there?
I was there about 8 years. The founder passed away, and I saw how important leadership is. And without it, how quickly an organization can crumble. Within 2 years, it was gone. It had dissolved. And it was heartbreaking. You know what it was like? I always equate it to almost like a relationship. So like, you're in love and everything's fantastic, and all of a sudden you're with this person and it's not great anymore, and you want it to be like how it was in the beginning, and it's just not, and it's never going to be, and your heart's broken, but you just keep working harder to make it to what it was. That's how it felt walking. Every time the elevator doors would open in the morning after he died, the place was just slowly just becoming this toxic place, and everyone was sort of out for themselves and trying to figure out where they fit. And I go to the partners. I'm like, you need to talk to the associates. And, they're like, well, who's talking to me? And I'm like, well, you're the leadership now. Like, you need to come together. And so I stayed a year and a half out of loyalty to the founder and wanting to do the best I could. And I couldn't. Like, Sunday nights became, I would call it the Sunday night blues. The last thing I wanted to do was get up and go to work. And I hadn't felt that. And I knew work could be joyful, and it was not joyful anymore. So that's ultimately what made me go, it's time. It's time to figure out the next act.
So what I'm hearing is that you actually took time off and didn't know exactly what you do in between. Is that correct?
I didn't do that exactly. As I
That
knew
would
I
be
was going
very
to.
brave.
Yes, but and I've done that at times, which is when I became a mom, I did do that. But I started my own consulting agency. I got certified as an empowerment coach in New York City, and I consulted to service providers, mostly law firms, and went out on my own.
So that is very brave, right? That's not, you were no longer a W-2 income employee. You took the risk to go out on your own. I'm curious how you had the courage to do that. And also, it wasn't a move to do marketing as a consultancy, if I'm understanding correctly. So
it was both. It was initially marketing, but my heart was starting to get called to the coaching once I got certified as an empowerment coach. So it was a transition, as you know, nothing's a straight line. There's so many bumps in the road. I did the marketing, and that's easy and natural for me, or it was at the time. Marketing's changed so much. But at one point was like, I really want to do coaching. And I had a guy I went to high school was in-house counsel for a real estate developer who needed to give a presentation. And I loved teaching on that kind of stuff too. So I met with him, and he hired me. He's like, but I want you to do my marketing. I'm like, only if I can do coaching. So I was my title was like VP of organizational development and marketing, but it truly was just the marketing. And, I had to figure things out as I went along. But in terms of the risk taking, I think that's a part of my nature. Yeah, it wasn't so scary to me. And also, I'm betting on myself, right, Laura? I'm taking responsibility. And if I fail, then I fail and I get another job. Or, you think, what's the downside? The downside is what? I could have stayed there and I would have just been there when it all literally just completely dissolved and had my heart broken even more of the loss of what that beautiful place had turned into. And here's the other thing. Okay, this is important. Actually, I'm realizing I had a huge amount of money saved. I just remembered. Yes, I had the financial stability. I didn't have to work for 3 years. I'd be fine. Or maybe more, maybe like 5. Like I was totally fine financially.
So that's part of it. But
No, that's a big part. That was a big part. In fairness to somebody out there, like I had money in the bank.
And I'm also hearing the through line of responsibility, that you were not sort of leaping into an unknown. You were leaping knowing you're there for yourself. You're employable. You're responsible. You're good at what you do. And you have a cushion. So it wasn't as frightening as.
I think that's important to mention. I'm realizing, yeah, because I did have that. If I didn't have that, I think I'd still do it. But I don't know, or I would have gotten a part-time job. But that sense of responsibility, like you talked about, I may have been a little bit more practical. It depends. Although so many of the entrepreneurs I've interviewed on my show say you got to go all in, no plan Bs.
Interesting. And why coaching? It sounds like when you started to do this, it was before coaching was as ubiquitous as it is now. What drew you into coaching?
I think like a lot of things, when you meet somebody, when I was at the executive search and meeting people who were doing marketing, it was like, oh, that resonates with me. That sounds interesting. And at the time, I actually had a friend who was being trained as a coach. And I was like, what's coaching? This sounds great. And I had felt a need to do more heart-centered work. Like I was feeling that calling, and this felt aligned with heart-centered work. And so I made the investment in the coaching program. It was in New York City. And when I was in it, I just felt so alive. And so that's always, to me, when you're sort of on the right path, when your whole body is giving a yes. And it was giving a full-on yes. And I've always loved helping people, and I'm a big picture person. So everything sort of made sense to me in terms of how I could put it into practice.
And can you help orient us? What year was that?
It was about 17 years ago that I went through the coaching program. I'm trying to think when I bought my condo in 2000. Does that sound right? I would have been 30 years old. I'm trying to do the math.
Okay.
And you're the math person. You do the math, Laura. And so I think I had just started dating my husband so it might've been like 2001. That was a long time ago.
So then how did that evolve? Because it sounds like it started off coaching employees within companies or partners within professional firms.
And that's when I took the pause, Laura, because then, so I did it for a few years. And I got married at 36. I had my nest egg and I became a first-time mom at 38. So at 38, I was still doing stuff. I actually launched a podcast at 38 when no one was podcasting. I give my husband credit for that one too. He was like, this is the next big thing. You know, you like to present, you like to help people, you're a coach. He made me a website and bought me my first mic and set me up on Christmas. Literally, that was my Christmas present that year. And then I became pregnant with my daughter and I was kind of burnt out. I was like, I want to focus on being a mom. I don't really want to do both. And truthfully, I didn't have any role modeling for that. So that's where the sense of responsibility, the focus on family, I wanted to be that mirror for my daughter. But truthfully, if I could go back and tell my younger self anything, would be, don't pull yourself out altogether. Don't pull the plug completely, because my work self was such a huge part of me. And I basically just shut the door on her. And you can't really do that in a way that's good for your soul. But that's what we learn, right? And that's why I relaunched my show. And it's really what drives a lot of what I do, because I think it's so easy for women to stop prioritizing themselves and to give to everyone else and to get depleted and then kind of forget who they are, what matters, or how to get started again. And, you know, and what's interesting, Laura, is there was one time where my mom, I think I was like in high school and my younger brother was in middle school, and my mom worked for a little bit at an accounting firm. And like I said, she had this great sense of fashion. And so it was so fun to see her in these beautiful suits. You know, that Barbie pink that's so in now? I still remember her. She rocked those. She was ahead of her time then. She had this cool pink suit and or her navy suit with the blue and white, you know, blouse underneath. And she looked fantastic. But what I remember about it, the part that I remember the most, was she came home laughing every day. She was so happy in her work. And it makes me a little bit emotional. It's really what drives the work that I do, because like I said, women are so quick to take a dream and say, well, I'll do it later, or my kids take priority, or everyone else takes priority. And so I always imagine these different careers, whether she would have been a fashion designer, or she's like very politically savvy, running a political campaign, or something, you know, just something of her own. I think she would have been amazing. You know, and so I saw that little, and it stayed with me. It just stayed with me about how happy she was to have had that thing of her own. But growing up, I didn't have that modeling of the mom that worked, had that thing of her own, and took care of the kids. So, and, you know, our situations for whatever particular reason are aligned in a certain way. I never take it for granted. I'm super grateful. And yeah, like I said, we all have our different things that we navigate, but that was not one of the ones that I had to.
And,
yeah,
you know, so thank you for acknowledging what a gift.
Oh, I know that it's a
in your
gift.
life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The parent
For sure.
that you had. So, Michele, it's clear that you have gifts of creativity, of seeing the big picture, of leadership. How did you channel those gifts while you were home with your daughter?
So I realized as a stay-at-home mom that drop off and pick up were like not, and I'm a people person. I just dreaded it. And part of it was like being around all these amazing women. And all we were talking about is, I can't wait for the, you know, so and my daughter is so excited for the play date with your daughter. And it was all this like sort of small talk, and I can do small talk, but I like to go deep. I like to know about someone. I sense that about you. You're really good at reading and understanding sort of the underlying themes about someone. And I was just wanting more. And so I believe that we all have these inner knowings, these inner whispers, and they're talking to us all the time. And some of them, you know, get loud, and some of them we really need to pay attention to, because we don't want them to just go away, that flame to just poof. And so I could just hear it. It was like, Michele, you need to prioritize yourself again. Go back to school, find something. And I was always interested in nutrition. I got certified as a holistic health coach when my daughter was 4. And then the program offered a class on how to self-publish a book. And I'd always wanted to write a book. So I wrote a book. And one of the things they said was that if you take this class and we're going to have a contest at the end of the 200 submissions, we're going to pick 10. You can win your $1,000 tuition back and you can get Marie Forleo's B School, which is a $2,000 program. I was like, okay, let me throw $1,000 at this thing and write this book and have this experience. And my book did get picked of one of the 10, and it aligned myself. I remembered how I love to write. It reminded me, I feel like you remember yourself. Like there's a lot of talk about reinvention. And I think for sure there's reinvention, but I think a lot of reinvention is really at the heart of it is remembering. It's just remembering what makes you uniquely you. It's remembering what your gifts and talents are, maybe those things that you take for granted. And so, yes, I remembered that I liked to write. I remembered how I won a poetry contest in 5th grade. That wasn't a poetry contest. It was, you had to write a story. And I wrote a poem and my teacher told me how I did it all wrong. And he was so disappointed in me because it was a poem that I wrote when I was supposed to write a story. It was about a play we saw about kids with special needs. And the poem ended up winning a citywide contest that I didn't even know we were entering. So I call it, maybe everyone calls it this, but the through line where you look back on your life and you realize how certain situations, certain experiences, certain memories, all of these things that you've done, even though they didn't disconnect and there were the road bumps and, the roadblocks and the things that didn't work out and the things that did, that sort of brought you to where you are today, and how it all connects to align you again. Anyway, I feel like I've gone too long, so let me stop there.
So you published the book, you found B School. I also enrolled in Marie Forleo's B School, never finished it, though I get invited back every year.
Me too. I do too. And I do a little bit more and a little bit more. I mean, we're like 10 years later and I'm still doing a little bit more, but yes, but it was more of like the taking the risk and having it. And even if I hadn't, and I published the book, I saw it was about self-publishing. It was important for me to start getting back out there. But Laura, truthfully, I wasn't valuing myself in the same way. I didn't promote the book. I didn't tell people about the book. I didn't do anything. And you know what the book is about? Self-love.
So it's not Design a Life You Love. It was a book you wrote previously?
No, it is that. Design a Life You Love is all about self-love as the foundation for a good life. And the book kind of, just like the poem, it flowed through me. I think we often teach what we need to embody and learn ourselves. And so it's taken me, I wrote it 10 years ago. I finally get it. I finally get self-love, really embody it. It's the journey sometimes. Sometimes it's instantaneous, and sometimes it's a longer road to believing in yourself and feeling you're worthy Yeah, it's interesting when you go on a different path. And I admire women who just go full on in and they believe in themselves and they feel that sense of entitlement, yeah, I'm going to do this. I had that more working for others or within a space that was so familiar versus when I stepped out on my own in a different way. So, yes, you can take the risk. It doesn't mean that the path is totally smooth.
Right. I actually think, Michele, that a lot of women have difficulty both in corporate settings. So maybe you had that inner knowing that you work hard and take on responsibility and are recognized. And it seemed, the guideposts are not as clear as an entrepreneur as you're talking about. Still, I find women tend to be perfectionists and are very hard on themselves. I mean, we have pretty terrible self-talk most of the time. We would never talk to our friends the way we talk to ourselves. And so I think that you are speaking for, perhaps some of the women who are listening in terms of really loving ourselves and being our own cheerleaders is not something that comes naturally.
No, but it's something that we can teach ourselves to do. And it's something that I do all the time now. I can confidently say from every ounce of my being, and I couldn't even have said this at 50, I am truly my best friend and champion. I am truly, something shifted in me. And it was interesting. It was after an interview I did on my podcast. It's interesting. It was with a therapist actually. And she did like this little mini session and something shifted in me, Laura. It was interesting. It was like, oh, I get it now. I get it. And I mean, if this is helpful, I don't know, but an exercise someone can do is to go back to a time in your life where you really needed that best friend, whether it was a heartbreak, loss, betrayal, something, a trauma, and you felt alone and nobody was there for you, including yourself. You can go back, sit comfortably, breathe, bring yourself back into that space and imagine yourself next to you. So if you were a little girl, you're imagining your adult self next to you. And if you're an adult, it's you now. And you bring the love and you don't have to write it. You can just say it in your heart. I'm so sorry that you went through this. You're so lovable just as you are. I'm so sorry you didn't have someone there for you. I'm here for you now. And you can give yourself that healing. And that's what I've been doing. And and the other day I was falling back into the pattern of the negative self-talk. And I'm like, no, I don't do that anymore. No, there's just not room for that here. You're doing the best you can, and that's good enough. You're doing the best you can, and it's good enough. Yeah. And this is for anyone though. You know what I mean? Like I said, we teach what we need to learn. It's taken me a long time to get here. It's taken me a long time, but I get it now. Like it took me a long time. I journal and I'd say, God, what do I need to know? And it'd be like, love yourself. I'm like, yeah, I love myself. Tell me like, how do I make money? How do I get to the next achievement? Love yourself. And I'm like, I don't understand. What are you saying? I love myself. No, I get it now. I really get it.
Thank you for sharing that practice. And I do think, I will sometimes take my hand and place it on my heart, or even, which is like really very hokey, but take my hand and place it on my cheek, like, sweetheart, it's okay. It's okay. We tend to identify what we'd like to change and speak to ourselves harshly as opposed to from a place of love. And I too, I will look in the mirror and make eye contact with myself and speak to myself. And I know that's not always comfortable for people to do. I sometimes say maybe start, rather than talking to your younger self, perhaps imagine yourself as a dog or some pet. It's somehow easier for us to show love to a pet than it is to our younger selves. And so find, as you just said, Michele, the practice that works.
Yeah. And pay attention to that inner chatter. Pay attention, because some of it is so habitual. You don't even know how mean you were being to yourself until you start paying attention. You're like, oh yeah. Yeah. And I did that the other day too, where I was like, you don't even know what to do next or something. I was like, no, that's not true. No. And I looked in the mirror. No, you'll figure it out. You've got this. Just like the way we would talk to a best friend. We would never, as friends going through a hard time. What are you doing? You're making a mess of your life. Could you imagine if we'd have no friends. So we need to befriend ourselves and really be so kind to ourselves.
So if people are interested in learning more practices for learning to be kinder to themselves, would you recommend the book? In addition to your podcast, where can they have access to resources from you?
Yeah, I do Monday musings on my show at times, where a lot of it is directed around more of the self-love. But yes, thegoodlifecoach.com has the podcast. It has access to the book. And honestly, I would also just offer that, people just spend some time listening to what their heart is whispering to them. Spend time journaling, 5-10 minutes a day. Just connecting, getting clear about what do you really want? We're so clear about what everyone else in our lives needs, and we're focused on that. But what do you want? What do you want? And just get connected to your truth and give a little bit to yourself, figure out ways to add yourself back in. And it's the simple things. And actually on my site right now, I've got 52 self-care tips. And I think self-love and self-care sort of go hand in hand, but the self-love is the foundation. The self-love is, what we're talking about is how you're treating yourself. And the self-care, though, is just, I think it's important.
Very. And culturally, though, we're trained to cringe, perhaps, when we hear this concept of self-love. No, that's, as though you're spending time taking care of yourself and no one else. And there's a certain amount of guilt involved. And I love the idea of being quiet enough to actually hear our own still small voice, which is also countercultural, Michele, we're so busy checking things off our to-do list and running from thing to thing that we aren't in touch with what it is that, as you said, lights us up. That is also a practice to take time, whether it's perhaps if you're a runner, you might find it as, in the rhythm of running. It doesn't have to be meditation, which, is something that I do routinely, but somehow find time to make space. Go walk your dog and don't listen to a podcast, something.
Yeah, infuse your day with joy. Just infuse little things. Like I have a commute now for my daughters to get her to high school. I'm in the car 2 hours a day. And my brain that loves to learn and to accomplish and was like, oh my gosh, I need to learn a language. I need to do. And so I connect with friends. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's a podcast. Sometimes it's fun music. It's just infusing, like just surrendering a little bit more. And you're right. Culturally, it's not, especially the American culture, it's not celebrated. This idea of prioritizing yourself is supposed to be selfish. It's not. It's not. It's literally the foundation for everything you desire in your life. And I believe we come from love and we return to love. And we are here to remember to love ourselves and honor what we truly, truly want.
Amen.
Amen.
So, Michele, as we get towards the end of our conversation, how has your definition of success shifted over these years? And perhaps even financial success?
On financial success? Well, it's interesting because I used to ask my guests this too. What is your definition of success? I do think success is very personal. I think for me, it's being present to the moment. It's not getting lost in what we were talking about, just the accomplishment and all the stuff. It's really being able to sit and appreciate what's in front of you right now. And for me, that's my husband, my daughter, my dog, the people I love. Success is knowing that you can find that peace and gratitude in the moment that you're in. That to me is success. And financially, I did an exercise with a breathing coach recently where we wrote a letter. You might like this, Laura. It was a Dear Money letter. And you had to write a letter to money as if it was a romantic partner. And I realized that I have had a lovely love affair with money and that I had actually betrayed it because at some point when I went out on my own and my husband's an entrepreneur, all this scarcity thinking came in. And so success as it relates to money it's a surrender and a trust in yourself and a higher power that you are being guided and to stay aligned and true to yourself and allowed yourself to be back in that flow.
Yes, I love the word surrender, and especially in the context of faith that everything will be okay. I once tried to communicate that to someone who didn't quite understand what I meant. And this was, around the time I was leaving Wall Street. And I said, I know everything will be okay. And they looked at me quizzically, like, you'll be able to hold on to your house. And I said, no, not at all. I'm not saying I have faith that nothing will change. We're constantly changing. Life is about change. I just know deep inside that whatever the change is, I will be okay. And that's also something that needs to be cultivated, right?
It does. I think having faith in something higher also does allow you to have more peace of mind and more joy. Because you're not, sometimes when things are too big, I say, God, I'm turning this over. And and I'm be respectful in audience, whatever your belief system. But for me, it is God. And I'll just say, and now my hand's on my heart too, Laura, like you said before, but I do that. And I'd say, I need help. I'm looking for guidance. I turn this over and I'm able to sleep in a way that I wouldn't have been able to in other times in my life. And I'm grateful for that too. I think, maybe that comes with time and age and experiences where sometimes you just have to turn it over and surrender and just say, you know what? And I get signs. We've talked about this before, but I literally see signs that I'm being heard. So I look for those. So look for the signs. In my case, they sometimes literally come in on license plates or billboards on the side of the road. So I think the universe has a sense of humor. So look for the signs.
Beautiful. I'm coming away with joy and surrender and look for the signs. Michele, is there anything else that you want to say to our listeners before we end?
I would say that for anyone listening now, you are lovable just as you are. You are worthy. You are good enough. And your heart knows the answers to what you're seeking. Have the faith and spend some time with yourself and know that you are worthy of love and to give yourself that love.
Thank you so much, Michele. This is really an inspiring conversation. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michele Lamoureux, host of the podcast, The Good Life with Michele Lamoureux. Some of my takeaways are to be willing to bet on yourself. Michele left the dream job she had for many years as director of marketing for a law firm. It didn't feel like a risk to her when our heart began to be called to coaching because she knew that she was responsible, she was a hard worker, and that if she failed, she could always get another job. And just as importantly, Michele knew that she had a big financial cushion, that she had money in the bank that could tide her over if things didn't work out. My second takeaway, remember what makes you uniquely you, what your gifts and talents are. Often, we take our unique talents for granted because they come so easily to us. Look back at your life for the through line, the situations, the experiences and memories that maybe didn't seem connected at the time, but brought you to where you are today. Michele was in a program to be certified as a holistic health coach, which offered a class on how to self-publish a book. The experience reminded her of how she had loved to write when she was younger. She wrote a book about self-love and received an award from the class. My third takeaway, pay attention to your inner chatter. We may not notice until we start paying attention just how mean our inner talk is, and so habitual. If we talk to our friends the way we talk to ourselves, we'd have no friends. We need to befriend ourselves and to be kind to ourselves. And finally, spend some time listening to what your heart is whispering to you. Make a habit of journaling 5-10 minutes a day to connect and get clear about what you truly want. We're so clear about what everyone else in our lives needs, and we're focused on that. But what do you want? Get connected to your truth and give a little bit to yourself. Figure out ways to add yourself back into your life. Are you enjoying this podcast? Please don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss next week's episode. And to help other women like you find this show, please leave a rating and a review if you're enjoying it. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Making Change with Your Money. Certified financial planner Laura Rotter specializes in helping people just like you organize, clarify, and invest their money in order to support a life of purpose and meaning. Go to www.TrueAbundanceAdvisors.com/workbook for a free resource to help you on your journey. Disclaimer, please remember that the information shared by this podcast does not constitute accounting, legal, tax, investment, or financial advice. It's for information purposes only. You should seek appropriate professional advice for your specific information.